Welcome to Healing Minds, Stories of Resiliency and Recovery, a conversation held at the intersection of substance abuse, mental health, and everyday living. Your hosts, Mark Regala and Justin Wolf, bring both professional expertise and personal understanding to the table. So welcome to the conversation. Let's dive in.
Everybody, and welcome back to Healing Minds, Stories of Resiliency and Recovery. And tonight with my co-host, Mark Regala, we are going to be covering, the differences in being proactive versus being reactive in recovery. And I think that's when we talk about what sets people up to be successful long-term is really transitioning that mind frame from I'm going to deal with it when it shows up to, I know this may occur and this could kind of set me off. So I need to be prepared when these moments hit and when these situations arrive at my doorstep. Because on my worst day, that's the stuff that's there that I need to be prepared for on how I'm going to navigate, manage, and still maintain my recovery and my emotional well-being. And so I'm thrilled to be having this conversation with you tonight, Mark, because I feel like this is something that just speaks to your wheelhouse and that you can really kind of provide some personal insight on and just really the power of mindset and attitude on recovery and that journey. So.
Yeah, I mean, again, we've talked about this in the past. I'll say it again. My mindset has completely changed. Um, you know, I had multiple visits to psychiatric care. I had 4 visits to alcohol and substance treatment. It was one of those things where I just thought when I can get out, I can continue to live my life and not have to change my daily habits, and be cognizant of my surroundings and things like that. It was only the last time that I was in treatment is when somebody actually relayed that information to me and basically told me, that your recovery has to come first and there's things you got to do every single day to keep your disease in remission. And I took that to heart, and that's the one thing that I do on a regular basis. I always say when I wake up every day, it's how do I get through the day sober, number one, and how do I have a good mental health day? And, whatever I have to do to have those 2 things in check, I'm going to get done. Okay, that's the one area that it's okay to be selfish in. Because if you don't do that, you can't be the best version of yourself. You can't be the best version of yourself for your partner, your spouse, your kids, your employer, whatever it might be.
No, and I love the fact you're kind of saying, hey, the best version of yourself, because that's something that when we're caught up in the thralls of our addiction, our mental illness, it's that idea is I'm never going to get there. But my disease is promising me that I'm going to get here. And that's the person I'm going to be. And it's hey, once I can acknowledge hey, my mind, my disease are lying to me. They're actually the very thing that's holding me back and really inhibiting me showing up the way that I want to be showing up and being present in this world and present in my relationships. It's just the way that mind frame just transitions is critical. Because I know for myself, man, I can just kind of speak about me, right? My favorite topic. Here we go. No, I used to be hey, you know what? I know this isn't working for me. I don't like where I'm at right now. But you know what? That's a tomorrow Justin problem. Tomorrow Justin will worry about that. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing right now because you know what? I'm just stuck. I'm stuck. I don't know what else to do. And so I'm going to turn back to what I know, even if it is hurting me and really pushing me further away from where I'm trying to get. And I think that's where that attitude piece kicks in really powerfully, where it's you know what? If I don't make it, so what? Right? I think you kind of get in those we've been in there in our darkest days where it's hey, I go to bed tonight. If I don't wake up tomorrow, so be it. It's been a good run. And I think that's got to flip. And I know you got some words to say on that, man.
Well, again, I am a believer that my disease is in remission. Okay, it's not gone. No difference than a cancer patient. The only difference is I can control controllables that can keep that disease in remission. Where I can't control if my cancer comes back or what have you. Okay, and that's the thing if you can control that and do the things you need to do every single day, okay, because you don't know what's going to come. Every day, life might throw you a major curveball. If you're on top of your game with your recovery, it's going to be easier to be dealing with those challenges, versus being lackadaisical, and then all of a sudden, oh, I better hit the gym, or I better do this, or I better hit a support group, or what have you. Okay, then you're being reactive, and that's going to lead you down the path of most likely, some type of relapse.
Definitely. I mean, you're kind of like setting in like these daily principles, right? Like, hey, each day I got to do this to make sure I kind of keep walking the path that I want to be walking down. And I think that's where it's like you shape your approach where I'm going to be proactive. Hey, I'm doing these things because my behavior, my choices to kind of do this is communicating to the world and to myself, like, hey, I actually give a crap about the outcome here. I actually want to see myself succeed versus like, you know what? Like, I don't know if I'm going to make it through today. We'll see how it goes. Roll the dice. Let's see how this party happens. Right. And I think that's the thing that really flips and it transitions. It's like, hey, I'm going to start treating myself like I actually care about myself and I care about the outcome here. So what do I need to kind of be bringing into my life? What are the things I got to be aware of that set me up? Who are those people that set me up? Because a lot of times I found myself lying to myself all the time. And I've seen a lot of people that I've kind of worked with kind of doing the similar thing where it's like, hey, these people around me, like they don't influence me. I'm the one at the end of the day still making this decision. They don't really matter. We all know they matter. And if it's somebody who's going to kind of be encouraging, like, oh, they're looking to get down, like we're looking to get down, and it's really not what we want to have showing up in our lives, then it's going to be really hard to kind of let that go. And so that's when, like they say, recovery's easy, just change everything. Like, funny. I heard that one too many times, and I was just like, yep, okay, it's lost its humor on me now. but it's true.
It is true, but here's the deal. If you do the right things every single day, everything will change over a period of time, and you're not even aware of those changes that are happening. Yeah. I think that's important to understand, because that can be intimidating, when you got to change everything in your life, people, places, things, and so forth. But if you start doing the right thing and living a life of recovery, your circle around you is going to morph. Okay. If you start doing healthy living, like I said, going to the gym, okay, you're going to build, some type of culture there too, where you're going to meet people that have similar lifestyles to you, so things, by doing the right things morph, okay, and things change, but they fall into place, versus going the other route where, chaos could resume again.
Right. And I think that's, like, you bring up chaos, and I think that's a key thing here because a lot of people get really comfortable living in chaos, and chaos starts to feel normal.
That's exactly correct. And then you realize the chaos that you caused and how simple your life can be coming out on the other side. And you're like, man, why the hell did I ever live that way?
Right. See, my favorite part was, sorry, man.
You just didn't know any better.
Yeah.
You were sick. I mean, that's what it comes down to. You were sick.
Exactly. And my favorite thing used to be, I'm going to throw it at everybody else. Like, why is all this drama following me around? I didn't realize, like, it can't be because of me. Oh, no. Why are these people doing these things? Like, yes, it's when you're kind of living in it and kind of feeding into that. It's hard to get something different where it's like, oh, I got this consistent, predictable response from the people around me. Well, of course not. People are going to respond to what you give them to work with. And if I'm giving them just madness to work with, in a sense, how can I expect a rational, logical response? Like, that was our own chaos. And I think that's the part where it's like, hey, this needs to change. My relationships need to change. I need to change. We all need to do something different to kind of bring about the life in the relationship and just what we want our world to look like, that we want to be showing up in each day, like that. Because that's a hard thing to kind of roll out of bed in the morning and be like, wow, I'm glad I woke up today. Here we go. We got another shot at this. And I think that mindset flips to, it's like, it goes from like, oh, it's another day too. Thank God it's another day. I got an opportunity to kind of do something with this now. And I can show up and be present the way I want to be that way. And I think that's a big flip in the way when we're talking about like being proactive in our recovery here versus reactive, right? It's like that mindfulness piece. And I cringe every time I say mindfulness because it's used so often that it loses its power. that when we're talking about mindfulness, I mean, to actually sit there and actually be intentional with your attention and where you're directing that and tuning into what's going on with you and also being attuned to what the other person across from you is giving you to work with, like that takes a lot of energy. It also helps you tune back into your body that you might have spent a lot of time and energy running away from and trying to get away, which can also be terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, again, it can be terrifying, for sure. But again, I mean, it really comes down to self-talk.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I keep reverting back to past podcasts, and I apologize for that, but it's true. We talked about this. I mean, you know, I could focus on the person I was,
Mhm.
or I can focus on who I am now and all the changes that I made. If you're gonna focus on the positives, it's gonna shift the narrative in your brain. I mean, even now, when I'm in a tough situation or something challenging is happening, and I mean, my brain might eventually initially go to, why again is this happening to me?
Yeah.
But I get control of that thought, and I said, okay, what's the positive that can be taken out of this? Even though it's a challenging situation or an insurmountable situation, depending on what it is, work-wise, person, whatever it might be, in my mind, what's the positive I can do? What can I do to control the situation as best as I possibly can? What actions can I take in a healthy way? Um, and that just comes with time. That comes with practice.
Mhm.
I mean, it really does. I mean, eventually you will get there, but early on, it's a lot of self-talk. I mean, there's a battle going on in that, for sure.
Right. And that's one of the most challenging things to do is you're saying, hey, let's take a step back and actually tune in to what's going on internally here. And going into that mental playground where that that could be the last arena that I want to be entering because of what I've been through, what have I experienced, and what I've done when I haven't been showing up and being present the way I want to be, right? Like when substance use and mental illness is running wild and it's kind of taking the steering wheel, we might not be showing up the way that we're proud of and that might actually want us to turn and hide and not show our face for 7 to 10 days because of what transpired. And I think that there's so much power in tuning into like ourselves as we are, where we're at in that moment, and not going with that autopilot that kicks in. Because a lot of times that thing is the first thing to fly in. Hey, this is stressful. This is overwhelming. This is difficult. You can't physically escape. Let's go on that mental escape now and I'm going to take control. And then we're just kind of going through the motions, putting us in positions unknowingly, right? A lot of times where it's like, oh my, how did I get in this situation? How am I in this high risk situation now when I was just kind of watching TV a couple minutes ago? Like, how did this happen? How did this person get here?
Sometimes that happens pretty quickly. And when that does happen, you got to rely on those coping skills.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing again, we're talking about being proactive versus reactive. Every day you're working on those coping skills. You're sharpening those skills. So that way, when you do have that one moment, you know where to go to.
Yeah.
As opposed to, I haven't worked on a coping skill for months and months and months. Now I'm going through a challenging time. Let me think back to what I heard at a support group or what I heard when I was under care,
Right.
and and try something real quick to help me, whether it's a breathing exercise or whatever it might be. That's not the time to do it. The
Right.
time to do it is leading up to that challenging situation, and we don't know when that challenging situation might come or those thoughts might come, and that's why it's important to be proactive and be cognizant and be doing things every single day.
Right. No, I think that example you gave is like perfect because I feel like that's what happens a lot. It's, hey,
Yep.
here's this crisis survival skill. This is going to help you get through those really overwhelming times that feel unmanageable. We can do this, we can practice this, and it's like, I'm just going to put this away. When crisis hits, I'm going to it. And then what ends up happening, crisis hits and our mind goes blank.
Yep.
Or we do what we know because we're on fight or flight mode at that point. We don't have the ability to kind of like, let's slow this down. I'm just going to walk it back. Let me play the tape on like, what was that skill they talked about? And what early warning signs did I miss in this process? Because that's a key thing here as we're kind of talking about like this daily practice and making sure those skills are ready to be used, is that we know when we start to kind of not be showing up at 100% what we're looking like and what we tend to start to let go of, right? It's like, oh, I stopped reaching out. Yeah.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I mean, I use the example of Thanksgiving weekend last year. I mean, I decided to take off Thanksgiving weekend, from work, from the gym, whatever. So that's, 4 days missing from the gym. And I know it's Thanksgiving and all that stuff, but let me just tell you, the diet went south really quick over those 4 days. Okay. Not only did you not work out during those 4 days, but now the diet got worse every single day. Where you had to reel it back in, get in check, get discipline again. Because that's an important component to my recovery, as my diet and my physical fitness. But it's so easy, just in 3, 4 days for things to kind of go away.
Right. I mean, especially when you stop like the disciplines that are kind of in place that have kind of helped you achieve what you've achieved and where you've gotten to start to go by the wayside.
Yep.
And I think that tends to be a common thing that when we're talking about like putting people in like these reactive situations is like, hey, I'm feeling good. Recovery's a lot of work. Why do I have to do all these things every day? Don't I deserve a break? And then it's like, you know what? I can let this go. And then I can let this go. And all of a sudden now these things that were kind of like your foundation, all you're left doing is walking on this pole and you're like, can I keep my balance? And then there's a hard gust of wind and throws you right off. And now you're back into crisis.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of, what do you feel like works to manage those early warning signs so that they don't get to a place of being overwhelming and possibly a setup for somebody? Because I feel like a lot of people, like, if you're not taught this stuff, you're not introduced to this stuff, you just do what you know.
I mean, I'm going to sound like a broken record. I mean, I really am, because it works for me. But I mean, obviously the gym, obviously diet, obviously support groups, whether that be through, an organization like NAMI or AA or what have you. Obviously, a network of people that have a similar lifestyle that you're living right now. Living a life of, I mean, a very diversified approach.
Yeah.
I mean, a very diversified approach. And the reason why I say that is because, I use the example of the stock market. I'm an investment guy or whatever. You put all your eggs in one basket, okay? Your goal is to go from point A to point B, and you might go from point A to point B, but you put all your money on one stock, it's going to look like this, trying to get up there, right? But if you diversify your portfolio, you're going to have some ups and you're going to have downs, but it's going to go in a straighter line to the goal that you want to achieve. Well, the goal I want to achieve is long-term, permanent recovery. Okay, so I'm going to be very diversified in my approach, so that way I don't have the peaks and the valleys. I'm going to go in as straight a line as I possibly can. It's not going to be straight. There's going to be ups and downs, but the peaks and valleys aren't going to be as great. And they're not going to be as great because all the activities that I'm doing on a daily basis, a very diversified approach. And I'll use the example of COVID and AA.
Yeah.
When they shut down those AA meetings and thought it was only going to be 2 weeks, and then they started backpedaling and they came out with the Zoom option and then eventually the hybrid or what have you. Whatever happened during that time, it was a complete pendulum shift because the attendance in those meetings went up ridiculously. And I personally saw people that all they relied on was that one support mechanism. And after long terms of sobriety, came back after COVID, the first time I saw them, and they relapsed. But the people that were very diversified and wasn't just relying on that because that was taken away, okay, because of what was going on with the pandemic, but had other opportunity or other coping skills and doing different activities, okay, they were able to get through it. It's the best example I can give you. And then it's just been snowballing since in these AA meetings.
Because we got more options to pull from. It kind of sets you up a lot better in the sense of like, hey, just like if you're a carpenter, right? Like not every job requires a hammer. You can't hammer everything. And at some point, you're going to need some other tools, some other resources to kind of help you get the job done. And you kind of really hit on a big one there that I feel like is huge, especially when we're talking about being proactive, is like building that support group, like building those social connections and relationships with other people so that you have this network in place so that you're allowing other people to support you, which I feel like is huge because a lot of times it feels like, hey, I'm on an island and the things that I were doing were isolating me and disconnecting me from other people and like damaging these relationships. So it made it really hard to want to show up and communicate and express needs, wants, desires, all of that. And to kind of say, hey, you know what? I even believe I don't deserve to be supported going through this because of all the awful things I've done or the things that I've said or didn't show up for when I promised I'd be there, right? Like building that support network is such an uplifting and terrifying experience to kind of say, hey, I'm going to trust these people here to actually show up and maintain and have my best interest in mind. And we just met, we might not have grown up together. Like that's a huge risk, but even knowing where to kind of like build these relationships with can pose a challenge. And so I know your story of kind of like your workout buddies, man, like I think that kind of speaks volumes about just what that practice and those principles go into.
Again, it's an example of I didn't really set out for those changes. It just happened, but it happened because I was, in my eyes, doing the right thing.
Yeah.
That's the best way I can say it. I look back at everything that has kind of morphed and like what my world looks like now. And it wasn't like I went out and said, well, I'm going to replace these 10 people with these 10 people and I'm going to be, doing, no, nothing like that. It was just doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Just trying to keep my disease in check, trying to keep it in remission. And by being in the right place at the right time, you meet good people that got similar lifestyles to you. Maybe they're in recovery as well. And then your entire network changes. I've said this before. It's weird. And I would have never guessed this in a million years, but you go from a group text of a group of people saying, do you want to split a bag of pills? Okay. To literally a group text where everybody's checking in at the gym at 5 a.m., 5:30 a.m., 6 a.m., and they're sharing their breakfast and they're sharing their lunch or what have you.
Yeah.
Of course I wanted to get away from that first text, but I never would have imagined in a million years, that I would have this type of network and this group of guys to be able to lean on for support and we all support each other and so forth. But we're just doing the right thing. Just doing the right thing.
Yeah. And it's huge. It's huge, especially when you share a common interest. It's something that's kind of supporting you, taking care of you. And I think it's just like, hey, who are you investing your energy and your time into? And what's kind of the return that you're getting on those investments, right? Like now your stock market analogy is stuck in my head, man. So thank you.
It's a good analogy. I've used that quite a bit and people relate to that. But it's true.
Yeah. I think one of those things like, hey, you're surrounding yourself with these people that kind of build you up and support you and push you forward. But what about the people that have kind of been there throughout it, right? How do you separate yourself from those people you got history with? That you're like, hey, I like you, and I really, really want to keep this relationship. And at the same time, I know by keeping this relationship, it's really damaging me or putting me at risk. How do you kind of balance that?
I'm not going to lie. There's a lot of relationships that I had to end.
Yeah.
Just being straight up with you, I just couldn't be around them, didn't want to be around them. Their lifestyle just didn't match anything that I wanted, moving forward. I got a few people that I might still talk to that are near and dear to my heart. If I do see them, they're not going to drink in front of me. I'm not going to see them in a bar or anything like that or a restaurant. They might meet, for a cup of coffee or something like that. I try to meet them in a controlled environment, if
Yeah,
that makes sense.
totally.
But honestly, the vast majority of people that were part of that lifestyle, they're they're pretty much out of my life, and they needed to be a part of my life. Out of needed to be out of my life.
Right.
Because I just did that was not that was the old me. That person's dead.
Mhm.
This is the new me now, and I don't care to be around some of those people and their habits anymore. Um, it's I mean I really can't even say it was hard because I think having some of the conversations with them, they knew. I mean, they were actually glad that I was getting myself straight. Um, and some of them, have come to me for help. And, of course, I'm never going to turn somebody down if they're trying to change their life and, trying to get sober and so forth. But I think people respected it. They knew that I had to put my sobriety first. They saw how bad I was and how quick I got that bad. And I think that they were scared. So, everybody's been pretty respectful. I can't say there was any confrontation or anything like that.
Yeah. No,
But it
'cause
had to be a complete change, though, Justin. A
yeah.
complete change.
Right. I was kind of curious what your experience was with it because I know, like for me, it was one of those things. I'm like, they're still getting after it,
Yeah.
and I can't be getting after it like this. So I'm just going to kind of pull away, drift away, and it's like that. And that was really hard because these are people I grew up with.
Yeah.
I knew for years, had never like history with, and it's tough. It's really tough, and I know that if I stayed in the same scene doing the exact same thing with nothing changing, there wasn't going to be anything productive that was going to come out of that, at
No.
least for where I'm at.
No.
And so I think it's really kind of like balancing. And I think that's like a big shift that kind of happens at some point where it's like, you know what? I got to look out for me. And I got to think about if I continue associating and running around with the same people doing the same things, how is that going to play out for me long term here? Is
The other
that
thing,
getting me where I want to be?
yeah, sorry to interrupt.
No,
The
you're
other
cool.
thing is too is sometimes it works itself out. And what I mean by that is, there are some people that I don't know if it's intimidation, or I have something that they want and haven't gotten yet or whatever, but they just kind of faded away once
Yeah.
they started seeing the changes. I mean,
Right.
and I didn't even have to have those conversations. They just, boom, went away.
No, and as you talk about changes and we're kind of talking about just like this growth, I think it just kind of leads beautifully into like this idea of like having goals. And I think that when we're talking about like being proactive versus reactive, it's hard to have goals if we're just reactive all the time. And it's like my goal today, get through the day, right? I feel like
Yeah,
that's like a very common mantra that a lot of us can kind of carry where it's like, I don't know what I'm doing tomorrow, but I know today I just gotta survive this.
yeah.
And eventually that transitions into like, what am I doing? Where am I going? And what did you find were some of like those early goals that really helped you kind of stay on top of stuff, man, and kind of stay proactive in your approach?
Are you talking from a sobriety perspective?
Yeah.
Get sober and look, okay. I mean, early on, I was taking a friggin' shower and brushing my teeth on a daily basis. As sad as that sounds, that was a goal
Yeah.
because I was in such bad shape physically dealing with withdrawals and stuff like that. Um, and then from there, it was okay, well, then I want to start eating again
Yeah.
because you were so sick you weren't eating for a period of time. Then it's like, okay, well, I need to get my body moving, let's start walking. And like I said,
Yeah.
a win early on was just walking around the block, which was a hell of a lot more activity than I was getting because I was bedridden, going through what I was going through. And then it just kind of escalated from there. I mean, of course, I had goals as far as working with my therapist. I had goals as far as how many meetings I wanted to attend per week. Um, I had goals long term and short term. I mean, obviously, from a sobriety perspective, 30 days sober,
Right.
60 days sober, get those chips at the AA meeting, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 3, you know. But it's like, what are you doing? You got to break those goals down into a series of steps to be able to achieve that. And
Right.
early on, it was very, very basic, and celebrating those small wins,
Exactly.
showering and walking around the block, and the first day that you made it to the gym with your buddies, even though you felt like crap, you know. I mean, no, the strength that it took to get you to do that,
Right.
and remind yourself of that, because it wasn't easy.
Right. Like, actually giving yourself credit for the wins as opposed to just saying, you know what, I was supposed to be doing that anyways, which we do a great job of just dismissing and minimizing the things that really are critical and important to sustaining our well-being.
Yeah,
And I think that stuff where it's like, hey, like things just don't evolve into, reaching that 1 month, 6 month, year plateau. There's a lot of work and intentionality behind choices that are being made in that process that allows us to get to that spot. And I think a big part of that with like the setting goals, like I could just kind of speak on myself, right? Where I found one of the most helpful things that I kind of put into place that I felt was like, hey, you know what? I'm going to try and like seek support or guidance or feedback ahead of time instead of waiting for that crisis to hit. And so making sure that, hey, things are cool, calm, and collected. We can have like a very logical, rational conversation because when this situation happens, or if it happens, there'll be a plan in place on what's going to happen, how we're going to respond to it versus letting that autopilot take control and say, you know what? I'm going to let my best thinking do its best work here. That's not really a plan for success. So,
and the other thing too is, once you have a stretch of recovery, and sobriety, you're going to kind of know your patterns, and I mean, you're going to know if a certain holiday is tougher to get through
mm-hmm.
than another. You're going to know if a certain birthday or a death anniversary comes up is going to
Mm-hmm.
be tougher to get through than another. And when you see that stuff coming up and you know your patterns and you know that you struggle with those specific holidays or days, that's when you need to be cognizant and again, be proactive in knowing that that's going to
Yep.
be a challenging time, and really, maybe take it up a notch a little bit, whether it's in the gym or maybe hit a
Yeah.
couple more meetings than you normally do, or reach out to your support group or network or what have you. But that takes a little time. It
Definitely.
takes I mean, I in the first holiday, the first holiday that I had that I was sober, major holiday, was a Thanksgiving. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
major holiday. And man, it was I was so nervous, I was so scared. My kids obviously weren't talking to me, and I'm going through all these feelings, of Thanksgiving, remembering all the times I was with my family and so forth. And I remember hitting to the gym like
Yeah.
late at night, and that Wednesday night before thing. It might even been after midnight before I finished my workout. Man, I couldn't sleep. Anxiety running through the roof. I checked the AA app, and I saw that there was a meeting in like Villa Park, like at 6 o'clock in the morning, which is not too far from where I live. So I decided to drive there. Not a car on the road. Not a car on the road. I turn on the street where the meeting's at, and I can't find a damn parking space. I walk in there at 6 o'clock in the morning on Thanksgiving. I mean, I could not believe it. I mean, they were serving food already. The place was packed. I met people from out of state that were actually looking to get some support to get through the day. I
Yeah.
mean, it was, being there and seeing those people going through some of the same feelings that I'm going through was very, very therapeutic. So, knowing, and that was my first time going through those feelings by myself. But now I know Thanksgiving is a tough holiday. So
Right.
now I know weeks prior, I'm going to be kicking it up a notch and then
Mm-hmm.
probably keep that going through the holiday season because the holidays are tough for me.
Right.
They just historically are. I mean, same thing like with birthdays and death anniversaries. I mean,
Yeah.
my sober date is my grandpa's birthday. I mean, I was also found practically dead on my parents' kitchen floor, and they had to Narcan me a couple times from an overdose. Okay, there's a reason why those everything was escalated that day. I was thinking about my grandfather, very near
Yeah.
and dear to my heart. Ironically, it ended up being his birthday. That was the last day that I ever used.
Hmm. Gotcha. Which I mean makes it even so much more powerful. The fact of like the change that you were able to kind of follow through and put into place starting that day.
Yeah, well, didn't have a choice. I mean, really, I didn't. I mean, I was in bad shape. It was either that or I was going to end up dead.
Mm-hmm.
Literally.
Right. No,
And I
I
was
think
very, very fortunate that I wasn't yet. Let's put it that way, the way I was living.
yeah, definitely. Definitely. I mean, just like the vigor and the approach you take to recovery, like nowadays, and you have throughout, just I think is like kind of like captured by even like our topic today of just being proactive in your approach and just the idea that, hey, like through embracing all of this, like the resilience. And I know like I throw resilience out there and I've had people kind of like say, shut up, don't say that to me. Don't call me resilient. Like, isn't that a positive thing that you're resilient? Like, no, it means that I've been through crap and I don't like to, I'm like, yes. And you, you're in a stronger position now because of that personal growth that took place during that time. And as you're talking and you're sharing about what you've been through, Mark, I mean, just like it's a complete and total transformation and journey of personal growth and development that really is your journey that you're on.
Well, I mean, I appreciate it. Honestly, I feel like the work's just getting started. Um, you know what they say, satisfaction's the first step to failure. I mean, the second you get complacent is when
Yep.
challenges set in. So, you got to constantly put one foot in front of the other and try to get better. That's the goal.
God forbid you give yourself credit, Mark. God forbid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
You can't rest on your laurels. I understand. I got it, man.
No, I mean, I told you, I feel good where I'm at.
Yeah.
I want more.
Right. And I think that's the stuff when you hear like even the idea of like a hero's journey, right? Like a hero's journey, like that idea of like, hey, they face trial, tribulation, something traumatic happens, and out of that, they grow and they develop into the hero of the story or their own journey. And I think it just speaks on the power of just like how transformational our life experiences can be and how we can take those experiences, knowing what we've been through, knowing ourselves and tuning into that, and then moving forward in a way that really is aligning with our personal values, our goals, and what that outcome is that we're searching for. Because at the end of the day, we got to ask ourselves, hey, the choice I'm making today, is it pushing me closer towards the person I want to be? Or is this something that's kind of moving me further away in that direction that I'm going to do some extra work to kind of make up for that choice I made today? And if that's the option that I'm making the decision to kind of follow through on, then that's just me saying, hey, you know what? Looks like I need to make a different choice here. And I think that's what this whole journey of being proactive in our journey is all about. It's playing it forward, looking at how are my decisions impacting not just myself, but those I care about. And am I going to be comfortable showing up and having a conversation with them, knowing that I made this decision? If I'm not, then that's telling me that that choice isn't the right one for me to be making in that moment.
Correct. I mean, I mean, it's not easy to do, but it is easy
Yeah.
to do. Let's put it that way. Okay. Again, it's just being cognizant of the thoughts, and making sure you're always making the right decision. We're human. We're
Right.
going to make some bad decisions. There's no doubt about it. We're not perfect, obviously.
Right.
We can't beat ourselves up over it, but we can learn from those mistakes too. Just like I've learned from my past mistakes, and that has allowed me to grow to become where I'm at today. And you did as well.
Exactly. I mean, it's how you build knowledge, right? It's not just like, oh, this is what I think I should be. Like, no, this is what I know I should be doing because my past history tells me that doesn't work for me. And I think that's also a key part in this too. When we're learning to be proactive, right? It's like you start to learn to trust yourself in this process. Because I know there's a big part on this path where in my own head, like, is this what I need to be doing? Is this really the best choice? You start doubting yourself and not believing the narrative that your mind is giving you to work with. And it makes it really challenging. So knowing that you're able to kind of, hey, I'm having this reaction, I'm responding in this way, and I feel that I need to do this for me, and I can believe that, and I genuinely can embody that, it goes a long way. It's so powerful.
And the higher power thing too, when you're going through challenging times, I have become a lot more spiritual on my journey, gotten a lot more involved, and learning about, just religion in general and so forth. I tell you, I mean, I have a peace inside knowing that my God or my higher power has gotten me through everything that I've been through so far, and Lord knows I should have been dead probably 20 times over. Okay. I got a pretty good feeling, even though I'm going through my challenging time, that he's going to get me through this too.
Yeah.
And that helps a lot.
Definitely. It's like, hey, you're not walking this journey alone, my friend.
No, not at all.
And Mark, I've loved having this conversation with you tonight. I mean, of course, you delivered and then some. I knew this was right in your wheelhouse, man. And so I appreciate all your insight and everything being able to share about just kind of what you've learned in your own path here about, the power of just, staying on top of your game and really doing what works and not letting that kind of slide. Because I think that's the stuff, right, that's kind of really helping you kind of move forward and others and ourselves, like, just move forward in a way that's like, hey, I can actually live in my skin and I'm okay being this person. And that wasn't always the case.
That's the most important thing right there. You got to love yourself, right? You got to feel comfortable with the person in the mirror. We've talked about that before too. That's a process, but this helps with you being able to do that.
Definitely. So thank you everybody for tuning in tonight or today or midday, morning, afternoon, whenever you're listening to us on your podcast. And we are going to be joined by a former guest coming back for a second round, our second timer here, Mark, coming back, Mr. Eric Metcalf, talking about peer support in the recovery journey. And so we're going to be riveted with what he has to share with us. And
well deserved to be our second guest, because he's a man of a lot of knowledge and very passionate about recovery in the mental health and addiction community. So I'm looking forward to what he has to say.
Definitely. I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, he will deliver, and we're excited about that. So we are so happy that everybody's joining us on these discussions. The podcasts, again, are going to air on the 15th and the 30th of each month. So feel free to tune in. Feel free to listen more than once if you really want to. And Mark and me, again, are open to comments and suggestions. So feel free to go to our website at namidupage.org/podcast to connect with us. And again, that website is namidupage.org/podcast. And feel free to reach out with any comments, suggestions, maybe topics you want to see us dive into. We are all for it. So again, thank you everybody for tuning in and listening. Mark, again, appreciate your wisdom, my friend. And until next time, we will catch you on the Healing Minds podcast.
Take care.
Thanks for joining us today on Healing Minds, Stories of Resiliency and Recovery. If you're on the journey to find guidance and insights, subscribe now wherever you find your podcasts. Healing Minds, Stories of Resiliency and Recovery is an educational resource, not a substitute for medical or therapeutic advice. The opinions expressed by the hosts and their guests are not necessarily those of NAMI DuPage. Go to namidupage.org/podcast for links to past episodes, show notes, and to submit a question or topic ideas for a future episode. Until next time, be well.